Hi, man. I'm a co-founder of SASS, and also you may remember me from such hit SASS lectures as John Adams, the most badass president of all time, and the history of toilets. So I'm here today to bring you another random history, the origins of mourning jewelry. So what is mourning jewelry, you may ask? Well, put simply, it's jewelry that commemorates the dead. And it was produced in enormous quantities during the 19th century when material objects, jewelry and otherwise, that communicated personal loss were a major focus of material culture in both the United States and Western Europe. So why do we care today? Well, because lots of our own traditions and ideas that we still live with right now had their origins in the Victorian era, the 19th century, when all this stuff was popular. So by understanding that time, we can better understand ourselves. Also, this stuff is just cool and weird and really fun facts for you to share at your Halloween parties, so listen up. Our story starts long before the 19th century. So today, we have motivational posters, inspirational quotes. Y'all are familiar. You might have it on a t-shirt or on a rustic wood thing in your kitchen. They had those in the olden days too, but instead of saying things like teamwork makes the dream work, they said things like remember to die. They said this, so you'll see at the top here it says, ooh, what is the button? Okay, Memento Mori, which is Latin for remember you will die. And the point behind this is I hope I'm not the first person, I didn't want to be the one to tell you guys this, but we're all gonna die. It's inevitable. It happens to everyone, and if you can accept this, then you accept that life is fleeting, that material possessions are not important, and whether you're king or pauper, in the end we're all gonna just be disgusting skeletons, so there's no point like being a dick about stuff while you're alive, because that's just fleeting. So this concept about Memento Mori, and you can see here's all these great symbols. You got Father Time with his scythe. You got the skeleton with an arrow to stab you with, corpse in a coffin, another corpse in a coffin, bones, gravediggers, tools, all these great inspirational images. So this concept of Memento Mori was around long before this woodcut, which is from the mid-17th century. It's English. Here's an ancient Roman mosaic, which puts it rather succinctly. It says in Greek, know thyself, thyself being this disgusting skeleton lying on top of spiky flames. And if you want to, you could take this Memento Mori concept in sort of a fun way. Like, if we're all just on a race to become withered, hollow corpses, why not have fun, enjoy the pleasure of life, eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we may die. Well, when Christianity came onto the scene, they had sort of a more bummer way to look at it. This is an illustration from the 1300s, I believe. It shows the allegory of the three dead kings, or the three living and the three dead. And basically the way it works is you have these three kings. They're loving all their king stuff. They love their crowns and their silk robes. They probably love feasting and court ladies and all that stuff. And they're just all wrapped up in it. And they're walking through the woods on a hunting trip, and they meet these three scary, what I might call zombie-looking dead kings, and they're like, who are you? Why are you like that? And they're like, well, we used to be like you once, loving our silk robes, but we neglected our duties to the church, and we cared too much about sort of the hedonistic, frivolous things of earthly life, and so when we died, we didn't get into heaven, and we are stuck here as these gross kings. So the point of this tale, the point of Memento Mori, is not just remember you will die, but remember you will die because you want sort of your soul to be in a constant state of grace, because death could literally come at any moment. Like literally any moment. And you don't want to be this guy having to explain yourself to St. Peter or whoever at the pearly gates, because he might not let you in. This is a for real thing. You can see it's from 1529 right up there. It's called Death and the Illicit. What is it? Death and the Indecent Pair. All right. Fair enough. So, and really at this time, death could come at any moment. And in the olden days, there big scary things like plague and smallpox and constant famine and war could come take you at any minute, or sort of, more minor things like not knowing that germs exist and you get a cut on your finger and that's the end. So you really want to just be prepared so you can get into heaven. This was a very real fear for people. And by the Renaissance and sort of early modern Europe, you see these Memento Mori images become very standardized and very clearly established in the Western artistic traditions. You have things like a cut flower, which is beautiful now, but we all know it will wilt and die very shortly. A skull, that one's obvious. An hourglass, the tempus fugit, your time is running out and it's finite. So if you want to, that was a long way to say, if you want to always remember this philosophy all the time, what better way to do it than on an awesome piece of jewelry that you carry with you everywhere. So this is a Memento Mori pendant from the mid-1500s, and it's a little locket. So it's in the shape of a coffin, and it's in golden enamel, and you open it up, and there's a scary skeleton inside to remind you that you're gonna die. You see a lot of Memento Mori pendants like this, you see this happy, loving couple on one side, but then the other side, oh no, it's a skeleton. They're gonna die too. And if you're, saying your prayers, counting on your rosary beads because you committed some sins and you want to be absolved for them, what better thing to count it on than on these rosary beads that are half monk face, who's scary, but he is alive, and half skeleton face. And these are carved at ivory. They're from Germany, from the 1500s, by the way. So this idea was so pervasive that you'll even find it on wedding jewelry. This is a betrothal ring, also, from the 1600s, 1631, and it's a really cool sort of jewelry called a Gimmel ring. So it's actually split in two, and you can open it up into two pieces, and it has a secret message inside. And it says, "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder," which that's an appropriate wedding message. But then you have this enamel baby. That's appropriate, like, oh, you're married, babies now. But then the other side, baby skeleton. They're all gonna die too. Sorry. So how do these Memento Mori jewels get turned into the later, maybe more familiar to us tradition of mourning jewelry? Jewelry meant to commemorate the death of a specific individual. Well, all you really have to do is incorporate a token that is representative of that individual into the jewel, the Memento Mori jewel. So this is a pretty famous one with King Charles I. And so not only does it say, remember that we'll all die, but it also says, remember that Charles I of England died and you were pretty sad about it. So you can look at it and think about him. Charles I was executed, as I understand it, for being a little too Catholic-y and absolutist, but someone else can tell that story far better than I. Since he got his head chopped off, you wanted it to be a secret if you were mourning him. So this ring is actually a locket, and you can see the closed version here with just a regular diamond on top. It's still Memento Mori. It says prepared be to follow me on the underside, but when you're in the company of your Charles I sympathizer friends, you can pop it up and show his portrait. So besides just a portrait miniature, what sort of tokens did people include in these rings? It might just be as simple as initials. This is a slide pendant that's roughly contemporary with that last ring. And this is the double phi, I think that's how you say it, the Greek letters. Then that would be the initials. And you have all the Memento Mori symbols. You have the MM for Memento Mori. And my personal favorite, old-timey, sort of creepy but cool symbol, the Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail, the symbol of eternity. So besides initials and portraits, a really common thing to be included in old jewelry is locks of hair. So you can see this is woven human hair. It's enclosed with a little baby skeleton underneath a rock crystal, a clear quartz lens. And this seems kind of icky to us today, but remember that hair, it doesn't decompose. Like, you can find Egyptian mummies with really sick braids still perfectly in place if they're kept in the right conditions. And it's a long, long time before photography allowed easy portraiture. So this was a really practical way to give people sort of a little token to keep something that you remembered the deceased by. And it wasn't, the thing about hair is it wasn't just used for mourning jewels, it was also given as a sign of love and affection. So just because you see a piece of hair in an old jewel doesn't mean that it's mourning jewelry, but we know this one is because of the skeleton menacingly waving the spear at you. So mourning rings became so popular that people who could afford it would, in their wills, designate funds to commission mourning rings for themselves to be handed out as party favors at their own funeral. And you can see these are all from the early 18th century, so there'd be standardized designs. So when someone died, you could be like, jeweler, 5 skeleton bands, please, and just engrave your initials and obituary date on the inside. And the idea behind this is that if you give more people mourning rings with your name on it, they'll be reminded of you so they can remember to pray for you. And if your soul is stuck in purgatory, if you're that handy guy from earlier and you're in purgatory, then maybe they'll help you out of there. All right, so now we've reached the early 18th century, what jewelry historians often refer to as the Georgian Era. It's named after the 4 English King Georges that happened in a row and one awkward King William that happened right at the end that messes up the Georgian things, and no one likes to talk about him. But anyway, during this time, during the Georgian Era, there were big changes in the way people observed death and mourning. So as the centrality of the church diminishes in people's lives, this is the time of the Great Enlightenment, as Aaron was talking about, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the role of civic life, of family, of the individual increases, and sort of the constant heavy weight of having to remember your own mortality becomes a bit passé. People don't want to think about it anymore. And so all these images that are a constant reminder of to just be ready for the final judgment, give way to imagery that is evoking affection and love and friendship, and with these, of course, unfortunately, the opposite side of the expressions of sorrow and lamentation and longing when somebody you love is taken from you. So here we see 2 rings from the 1750s. It's just 3 views of the same ring, so you can see all the way around the circumference. And there's no Memento Mori imagery anymore. It's just the obituary date and the name of the person. This was something sentimental, something just meant to sort of give comfort to the wearer in their time of grief. You'll also see lots of rings from this time with neoclassical imagery. So instead of skulls and arrows and gravediggers' tools, you see ladies in beautiful Grecian dresses mourning over urns. You'll see weeping willows. These are all made out of hair. Also, by the way, hair was still really big. So we got some woven hair. This you could actually chop up hair and dissolve it to make a pigment to get this nice sepia tone. This was hair. You sort of work it on a palette and mix it with glue, and you can collage it. This says nipped in the bud, so it was for a child. I forgot. On the last 2, you can tell from rings from this era, if it's black enamel, it meant it was for a married individual that passed away, and white denoted a child or someone who was unmarried when they died. So, how big are these? They'll take up like your whole first knuckle, so maybe like an inch or so. I would guess isn't what they normally are. So these you can see, but again, there's no sort of like death's head, really what we would call today morbid imagery. And they'll have phrases, like I said, nipped in the bud. You'll see things like gone to bliss, heaven has in store what you have lost, and it's sort of the beginning of the euphemistic phrasing that we're more familiar with today when people are discussing death. And you can see this change from the Memento Mori to sort of this more fluffy discourse in the Georgian era, and really clearly in gravestone art. There's a gravestone from the late 1600s in Boston. You still have the scary skull with wings on it and the crossbones. This is the grave of Mary Goose, which a lot of people say is the great real Mother Goose, but I think historians get mad at them. I didn't look into it. That's homework. And here's one from the 1823, and you see the urn and the weeping willow. And Mary Goose says, "Here lies the body of," and this one says, "Sacred to the memory of." So you can see it's not just in jewelry. There's sort of a general shift in the mentality of our ancestors, of our American ancestors. So besides the symbols, of course, portrait miniatures still stay really popular and appropriate in mourning jewelry. People were really sad when George Washington died. Classic old-timey way to die. I think he went for a walk in the rain too long, got sick, and then his doctor thought that he would get better faster if he bled him, but then it just made him die faster. So people were bummed about that. So you can find a lot of... some of these are from the collection of the Metropolitan Museum, but they're not uncommon. Like, a lot of major museums will have a George Washington mourning ring in their collection. So in conclusion, end of the Georgian era, lots of mourning jewels all around. They're more subtle. They're more to help people sort of get through it than to be ostentatious, like those bigger Memento Mori things. But that's about to change because we've reached the point where Queen Victoria happened, and Victoria loved jewelry, as any good queen should, and she used it to express the ups and downs in her life. Today we're going to talk about the downs. Sorry, Victoria, because the only thing she really loved more than jewelry was her husband, Albert, and he died. And he died a little bit suddenly and early, and it was the year 1861, and she dedicated the rest of her life to showing the world how sad she was about his death through fashion. She died in 1901. He died in 1861. So that's, what's that, 40 years? That's a long time. At this time, the sort of standard decorum for widows was 1 to 2 years mourning, by the way. So she just went for it. This is what she looked like after. Even her dog is sad. This picture is from 1867. So he had already died like 6-ish years ago. So, I mean, certainly a loss like that one carries with you, but like the full mourning was extraordinary, even for her own time. So we see with Victoria, mourning paraphernalia moving away from these subtle personal mementos to become a more loud public statement that's drawing attention to one's own bereavement. And it's also useful to remember that royalty dictated fashion at this time in a way that isn't really the case today. There weren't as many sources of inspiration. So people really looked to Victoria to see what was proper behavior, and in the Victorian era, proper behavior walked hand in hand with proper dress. So another sad thing happened in 1861. The Civil War started over here. So there were lots of sad people in the United States as well. And I don't know if this is the right word, but they sort of enthusiastically threw themselves into all these material trappings of extended mourning that Victoria had propagated. And here you can see fashion plates illustrating the same sort of style and encouraging other ladies to wear this. And you can see how much someone wearing what was called at the time your widow's weeds, your full black mourning outfit, how much they stand out from their peers. And just as an aside, men did participate in this. They did wear mourning outfits and have mourning jewelry like rings and watch fobs and sad black buttons and all that. But women were expected to more rigidly adhere to the rules. It's always the case. And so they were sort of the mascot of their family's grief. So a lot of the time, this full mourning is more visible in ladies than in gents. Lest you doubt my tale of the popularity of mourning outfits and accessories, we have these great ads for things like Jay's Mourning Warehouse, where you can get all your mourning wreaths or your mourning needs taken care of at short notice. It says, Masters J are always provided with the experienced dressmakers and milliners ready to travel to any part of the kingdom, free from expense to the purchasers, you guys, when the emergencies of sudden or unexpected mourning require the immediate execution of mourning orders. So it seems a little much. You're already dealing with this great tragedy, and then you're like, shit, I don't have the right dress. I don't have the right hat. I better go to Jay's Mourning Emporium first thing. So, it can get a little overbearing sometimes, and it seems like people at times were just sort of in a competition to brag about who could be the saddest. These are Victoria's daughters clustered longingly around a bust of their late father. This lady might win the saddest competition. Actually, I'm sorry. This might just be a picture of a ghost. Naturally, jewels were a necessary part of this ensemble. Some people even went so far as to have mourning jewels made to commemorate their pets. this lovely brooch of a Pomeranian up here. On the back reads, "Faithful and true muff. Obituary, November 24th, 1862. And then this one is for a horse. That's a lock of horsehair in there. And it says heart of oak. Oak trees, of course, being a symbol of constancy and stability and strength. And the back of this says, "Age 25 years, a pleasing tribute to her faithful services of nearly 22 years, was shot March 24th, 1826. They were real, those Victorians. Right, so if you saw from those last couple of slides, fashion was really big in the 19th century. Big sleeves, big skirts, so jewelry could get big too to complement these outfits. So you had these ladies with their awesome, huge jet beads, and this lady with her giant brooch. But I'm not wearing stuff, but I did get to borrow a couple of pieces from my work, so I have a real example of this. So if you guys come talk to me after, you can see it for a real one. But you can see there's a photograph in here, and photography was a relatively new technology at this time. Here's a mourning ring that Queen Victoria had commissioned, of course, to commemorate Albert, and here's their little V&A cipher on the sides, and then a photograph of him. So one of the more disturbing things for us today, and something that often shows up very poorly represented on internet BuzzFeed lists, is post-mortem photography was a thing. So getting a photographic portrait taken was a big process. It was probably on people's to-do list, and it took a long time, and you didn't always get to it before necessity dictated. So there is a fair number of Mourning Jewels and also just regular photo albums that have posthumous portraits of people in them, and it wasn't considered macabre then like it is today. But just because photos happened didn't mean that hair jewelry had to stop happening. As handily demonstrated by this distinguished gentleman and his distinguished lock of hair contained in this locket. And in fact, far from disappearing, hair became the focal point of many pieces of jewelry. So rather than just one element, it was like the main center thing. And you can see this is a brooch, a pin you would wear on your clothing. And it says, "In memory of." In memory of. So you would just be able to pick that up from the local jeweler whenever you needed and plop your own hair in, or have them put it in for you. You could also have jewelry that was just made entirely out of hair. This bracelet is just woven hair. You would just buy we call them findings, like the little metal bits that make it functional. This ring has woven hair around the entire outside of it. You can also weave it. They figured out how to weave it in sort of these springy, three-dimensional things. I think they kind of look like deer poo, but they were super fashionable then. It's a wonder these Victorians didn't just go bald, because they loved hair. This is a whole wreath made of hair. It's not a piece of jewelry. It would have been in like a shadow box on your mantelpiece or on the wall. That's commemorating somebody. And it eventually, hair work became so fashionable that people didn't even care if it was a mourning jewelry. They just liked how it looked, even though it looks like deer poop. And you could order pre-made ones from catalogs like this, just made with strangers' hair. That's a thing. So besides hair, the other ubiquitous material of mourning jewelry, Victorian mourning jewelry, is jet. Jet is compressed fossilized wood. There's deposits of it in England, most famously in the town of Whitby. It's lightweight. It's super easy to carve. If you ever hear someone say jet black, this is the material they're referring to. And it's not particularly shiny, so that makes it sort of ideal for mourning attire. It can be very somber. But it was also considered a gem. It's pricey. You can see it in fancy suites like this, really elaborate carving. So we have a bracelet, a necklace with a locket, 2 earrings, and a pin, a whole set to wear with your mourning outfit. Or you can see it in these really humble manifestations that just get straight to the point. I like to think Aunt Butler would have approved of this piece. So jet was so popular that you see a lot of imitation materials. This is a suite, made of French jet, which is just imitation glass from the 1880s. And I see pieces like this, and yeah, it's black, but this is pretty festive. Like, how sad are you really if you're wearing this? And this is from 1880 or 1879, towards the end of the 19th century. And here, when we reach these decades, when we reach the start of the 20th century, sort of the bubble bursts on the popularity of this egregious extended mourning. And within a few decades of the start of the 20th century, mourning jewelry is totally out of fashion. So the lengthy grieving of widows becomes sort of a thing to be caricatured and not aspired to. And here, this is circa 1900, Charles Dana Gibson, you know, the famous Gibson girls as the artist. It's from a series called A Widow and Her Friends. Yeah, these other ladies are not amused. They're like, just get over it already. Stop hogging everyone. So what changed? What led to this change in attitude? Well, in 1901, Queen Victoria, the stalwart champion of extended mourning periods, died herself. So there was that. The new king and queen are ready to party. Look how old he is when he becomes king. His mom lived so long. Poor Edward. He died like 10 years after he became king. It's the Gilded Age. It's the Belle Epoque, the fin de siècle. The people are richer than they've ever been, and they're just over just being sad about things that you can't change. So, and did anyone see the Art of Mourning exhibit at the Met a couple months ago? So this is a mourning dress worn by Queen Alexandra when in mourning for her mother-in-law, Queen Victoria. Half mourning. Once you got through the black phase, you were allowed to wear like purple and some other colors. And yeah, this is purple, but like it's a sparkly sequin purple ball gown. Again, are you really that sad? Or are you just figuring out loopholes at this point? All right, so another thing. Germ theory is kind of understood, and people no longer think of it as sanitary to carry around locks of dead people's hair on their person. And by the 1920s, all commercial hair jewelry and the findings to make it have completely disappeared from the American marketplace. And also, the corpse is no longer tended to in the home. So in 1863-ish, around the Civil War, embalming techniques were basically perfected, and by the start of the 20th century, they were available to a lot of Americans. So this sort of marks the beginning of the modern funeral industry, where the responsibility for preparing with the body for the burial and the funeral is taken away from the home and into the hands of professionals. So our culture starts to distance itself from the physical realities of death, and it became inappropriate to wear things that reminded you and let other people know about personal loss that you had experienced recently. So this can certainly be a good thing because one doesn't want to dwell on the negative. But if you think about it, when you go through a loss, whether it be a death or even something like a breakup or losing your job, it takes a minute to be yourself again. It takes a minute to get back in there. And if you show up to work looking like this, Cheryl from accounting is going to give you a fucking minute to get those reports to her. And we don't have that. We don't have that sort of buffer anymore. You're supposed to stoically bear it on your own as much as you can. But if you really like the idea of mourning jewelry and you're bummed that it isn't around anymore, don't worry, because there's a company called Life Gem that if you send them your cremated ashes, they will turn them into a diamond for your loved ones to wear.